Welcome to Season 3 of the Hope Sessions podcast. This season's episodes will consist of artists and creatives that I enjoy supporting and talking to. They have both blessed and encouraged me simply by hearing about their creative journey and how the Lord is using them to make much of Him. Remember, hope is to life as oxygen is to the body. Enjoy the show. Hello guys, and welcome again to another episode of the Hope Sessions podcast with your boy Jerry D. I'm so excited, yet again, another guest, new topic, just talking about their creative journey. And I'm honored to say tonight I've got a really special friend, someone who has deeply impacted my life just in the last couple of years with their friendship and their encouragement. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see his beautiful face already. But if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever else you're listening, I want you to know that this guest this week, his name is Nathan Cassidy. My man, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Jerry, thanks so much, man. Thanks for those kind words. And it is a pleasure to be here with you, man. And class to see what you've established and what you're working on. It's great to be a part of. So I'm blessed, man. Blessed to be here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My man, you know what it is. We've spoken before this went onto record mode. We're going to have a dialogue tonight. But before we get into that, I want to start off with a rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Sure, absolutely. Fire away, man.
Your favorite sibling?
Do I have to give an answer?
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, shots fired.
I would say Nick, only for the reason that we grew up together, side by side, similar age. Only for that reason alone. But other than that, I love all my brothers the same.
Yeah. You were supposed to say that because if you didn't say Nick, you'd probably beat the
I know. I'd be dead, man.
You'd be put into a sandwich, my man. And what's your favorite sport?
It has to be football.
Yeah, so your favorite team is?
Go on, Jerry. You know yourself, Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Your top 3 favorite songs of all time?
Always the worship perspective, because that's what I always listen to, like, all the time. So I love Psalm 46 by Shane and Shane, I think it is, and it's called Lord of Hosts, and that is my all-time favorite, and there's nothing compares to that one. So that's number 1. Yeah. Number 2 is probably Knowing You, Jesus. I think it's by Graham Kendrick, I think. Okay. I love that song. It's a bit of an old kind of a hymn now. It's getting so old. And another one then, probably In Christ Alone, maybe.
Ooh,
that's another hymn as well. So yeah. 2 cracking songs there as well.
Brilliant. Are you a Netflix guy or a YouTube guy?
Oh, probably YouTube. Yeah, YouTube all the time. I'm like YouTube nonstop. Yeah. The stuff that they be recommending to you on YouTube, you could be on it for hours, like, isn't it? It's mad.
Really? Yeah, you watch a 2-minute video and 4 hours later you're watching a documentary about flies or something, you know?
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, brilliant, my man. Are you a morning person or a night person?
Oh, Jerry, nighttime. Yeah. All day long, yeah. I can stay up till 2 a.m, no bother to me. But trying to get up, it doesn't matter if I'm getting up at 7 o'clock or if I'm getting up at 11 o'clock. Yeah. It's just as bad, like, it's shocking.
Yeah, I'm the same, man. If I have to be up early in the morning, I'll be up. If I have to be up at 4 minutes past 3, I'm up at 4 minutes past 3, but I prefer not to be.
Oh, stop. I know, and I got work done at 8:30, and I probably get out of bed at 29 minutes past 8. Stroll into the office next door because I work from home, and just stroll in, turn on the computer. And so definitely I'm not a morning person. I leave it as late as I can to get up. Yeah, well, I remember, speaking of the fact that you're working from home, man, Fletch, I know this is supposed to be rapid fire round, but who cares? Fletch was telling me, because he works from home, and his job is sometimes you have to turn on your camera on the Zoom meeting or whatever to take a picture. Yeah. And he was saying he's chilling in his pajama bottoms. Then when he has to get a team photo, he throws on a shirt just to look like he's literally. Yeah. No, I've got away from that one because no one's really pushed us for a camera, and my laptop, it's plugged into like a monitor, and so my laptop's like it's plugged down and it's kind of put away in the side, so I don't actually use the laptop at all. It's just like a little processor, you know. Yeah. So my my camera's never on. So I kind of get lucky there. I'm not getting caught out in my underpants or something, you know.
What's that cartoon? The animation, is it called Captain Underpants? Was that his name?
Yeah.
I can picture you being like him now.
No, Sharon will tell you now, I'm some state. If you come and see me in the morning for the first hour in work, I am some state.
Wow.
So yeah.
Brilliant. My man, what is your favorite meal to have?
Is it like breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
A meal, in my opinion, a meal is
meal.
dinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know, it's either going to be pizza or else McDonald's breakfast. Sausage and egg McMuffin.
Wow, I thought you were going to say something like an Indian or a barbecue or something like that, because you eat a lot of that stuff.
Pizza. Like pizza all around is just good, like, isn't it?
Oh yeah, like you get that large pizza, you're not sharing that with anyone.
No, not at all.
It's not a share. You know the way, you know, at McDonald's, right? You know they have that 20 box of chicken nuggets, and they call it a share box. That's discrimination. I have never once shared a share box with anyone in my life. Literally. Like,
I don't know now. If I ate 20 now, I'd be feeling fairly sick.
No, come on. If you're hungry, you fly through 20, maybe a couple more, you know.
Maybe so.
And plus, it's McDonald's, man. So with McDonald's, you
worry about the consequences later.
Well, yeah. Once you've got a plan B plan in case you need to go to the A&E, you should be okay, you know.
That's it. Too many chicken nuggets.
Yeah. What's your favorite summer fire memory, if you have one?
Oh. Do you know what? There's been so many really good ones, but there's always just one, and it's that sticks out in my mind, and it's just when God spoke to me in my heart, and He gave me a direction and a call in my heart, and I was just sitting down, listening to Pastor Carter preach, and just something just struck a note. I knew it was God speaking to me, and He told me, I knew what I was to become, you know. So it's just a matter of time and waiting. So that to me is a pinnacle moment in my life. And another great moment I had in Summer Fire Conference, there was an older chap, and I just started talking to him. I didn't have a clue who he was, never met him before. He's from the north.
Yeah.
His name was David David Calvert or Calvin, I think, something like that. I forgot his name now.
Yeah.
And we just started chatting away at the end of one of the services, and he was like, so, you know, what do you feel God's called you to be, whatever? And I think it was only that same conference, you know.
Yeah.
And he was like, do you know what? So we started talking. He's like, do you know what I'm going to do for you now? He said, do you have a €5 note or a €10 note on you? I said, I don't. He said, oh, I got one here in my pocket. So he took a €10 note out of his pocket. He ripped it in half, and he gave me one half. And he said, this is for you now to hold on to. It's useless for you to use for anything else. Just hold on to it as a memory and think of me whenever you stumble across it. He said, for the next 12 months, I'll be praying for you every single day. He said, what God has called me to is to intercessory prayer for people. Yeah. And I was like, I was really taken back by it because I didn't even know the man. Yeah. And he spent, and I know, and I believe, and I trust God, and I trust Him that he spent the whole year for the next 12 months praying for me every single day. And that meant so much. That was a huge blessing just to even hear that. And I still keep that note in my car to this day.
Man, wow.
Yeah.
That
was big.
I'm not gonna lie, when you said he took out a €10 note, I actually thought he was gonna do some magic trick or something. Flipping it out, giving you one half and him there.
Yeah.
The last one for the rapid fire round, my man, is the best holiday that you've ever been on so far.
Ooh. Would it be wrong if I didn't say my honeymoon?
It's your decision. I can't decide it for you.
I think it was 2005. Probably 2005, and we went on my first trip to America as like a teenager.
Yeah.
And we went to New York, New Jersey, and Florida. I've done a big old trip there, but it was my first time in Jersey, and we stayed with some new friends that we made there. Yeah. And Mike Patillo, you know, Pastor Mike from Colorado.
Yeah.
He took me out in his boat, and took Nick out. We went wakeboarding and tubing and lots of other fun stuff on the boat out in the water. And I've never had that much fun in my entire life up until that point. So that alone was like just unbelievable. And then Mike took us to the skate shop, and he bought us all skateboards. So shout out to Mike Patillo. He's an absolute legend. And still to this day, never forget that. And he's one of the greatest blessings in my life as well, Mike.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to visualize that, like what it's like tubing or wakeboarding, because I know for you, you're big into like adrenaline, like water sports and stuff like that.
The whole thing is just adrenaline, like, and the speed is scary, you know. But it's so much fun, and that was the first time I've ever done it. And all shout out to Mike, because Mike done all that for us, and great time. So yeah.
I was going to ask you before we move on with that, right? So you know, if you're on the tube and that, and the boat is going however fast, obviously you're going to come up, you know, the waves that the boat leaves. When you come off it, when you slap the surface of that water, is it as sore as it looks?
Oh, it's ridiculously sore. It depends how you hit it. Like,
okay,
if because you're kind of hovering around the back of the boat when it's going straight, but when it starts going on a big huge turn, a big bend, the whole tube swings completely way out to the side, and it practically doubles the speed nearly. So if you're going 15 kilometers an hour, all of a sudden you're doing 30 and you're going sideways and you can't really control it. And all of a sudden, if you hit a small little freak wave or some of the wake that comes off the back of the boat, man, you're going flying. So it's crazy, but it's great fun. Great fun.
Yeah, of course. My man, listen, this is the Hope Sessions podcast, right? And before we get into any questions, I've heard your story many a times. I know your family well. But maybe for the guests listening, they either know Nathan as the guy who does worship, you know, he's married to Sharon, all these great things, but maybe they may not know your testimony, where the Lord has taken you from and where he has brought you. So would you forever, for the next 5-10 minutes, or however long you feel yourself, would you share your story with us, man?
Sure, absolutely. So for those who don't know me, I grew up in Cork Church, used to be known as Donnybrook Church, Donnybrook Pentecostal Church. And so I'm the second eldest son of Pastor Nick Cassidy, and he's the head pastor and founding pastor of that church. So I grew up in the church all my life, from the youngest of age, really. Since I was born, I grew up in a Christian home, 3 brothers, 1 older, 2 younger. And that was just like, church is just my life. I grew up in that all my life. And that was just, it became who I was, just purely from, you know, obviously where I was born and raised. But I suppose it's only when you start becoming a teenager that you really start to find out who you are yourself. And you start to develop into your own person with your own opinions, your own attitudes, and all that kind of stuff. And I gave my heart to the Lord at a young age, at the age of 8, and I do remember it well. Even though after you give your heart to the Lord, and you're never fully sure, and you probably do it 6 or 7 times after that, you know, because you want to be sure that you're sure. That's, you know, you don't fully understand the concept of grace and the new covenant, and so the amount of times I gave my heart to the Lord, I probably can't count them, but I do remember the first time, and I was lying in my bed, and so yeah, but I suppose it's been a learning curve for me right through my teenage years, who God was, how much He actually loved me, and it took a couple of years to develop that understanding of His security. You know, that we are secure in Him, our salvation is secure in Him, and so there was huge freedom found in that as well. But I suppose at the age of kind of 15, 14, whatever, right through school, I struggled a lot with friendships, or kind of being bullied, but not like bullied like you see some kids now, where you're just kind of kicked in the corner all the time. But you know, you're always kind of, you're never part of the real group, the group that you want to be part of. You're never in the core group. And even though I had some close friends that I love greatly, Charles Ward, myself and Charles grew up right from the youngest of age right up to secondary school, and we're still great friends. So he was there all the time, but I always wanted to be somewhat popular. I think most people did. So you wanted to be part of a certain group, and you always kind of get kicked out. And so my teenage years, I always felt very lonely, even though I knew how to be the right person in church and stuff. But there's a loneliness inside you that you can't fulfill yourself, because you want somebody else to do it for you, and they don't really want anything to do with you. And you know what? So it was a real struggle for me, but God kind of put so many different things in my path and just carried me through it. I went into college then, and I thought, you know, I can turn over a new leaf now in college, new friends. I'm older, I'm more mature. I don't have any old stigma over my head or any old, you know, nicknames or whatever. Totally new people. And I never really connected with people in college either, primarily because I was dating Sharon at the time, and my social group was in the church and in the youth group. And Sharon was, even though she was my girlfriend, she was also my accountability partner as well, because she made sure I wasn't going out drinking on any of those nights with the college guys or doing any unnecessary socializing. So she was watching me like a hawk. And I know at times I probably didn't like it at, you know, 18, 19 years old, but that kept me on the straight and narrow. So so God put certain things in place, and he blessed me with a wife, and we got married when I was 22. And not too long after that, my career had to start to develop things. I came out of college as a quantity surveyor, and but just before, up to that point, I suppose I was heavily involved in the youth group. It was all about serving God. And one thing that God has put really strongly in my heart, if you want to be a member of any church, doesn't matter where you are in the world or what church, it doesn't. The call to serve the church that you're in doesn't change for anybody. I believe everyone is called to serve the church in some capacity. And I learned that from the youngest of ages. Pastor Stephen took me under his wing as a youth leader. Started off with Gavin initially, but it had transitioned into Pastor Stephen. So for the most part, it was under Pastor Stephen. And it's such a great guy, as you know. I think you had him on your podcast as well. So if you haven't watched that one, guys, go back and watch Pastor Stephen. So he's a great friend, great mentor. I learned a lot from him. And so I matured a lot as a Christian and how to serve. And I was also a worship leader from the age, I think I started leading worship at the age of 17. And so God kind of graciously gave me that, he gave me that door. He opened that door for me. And I've just been serving in that ministry ever since. I remember I watched back over some old videos of me singing at a conference here and there or other stuff, doing ministry songs, and it's shockingly bad. It's embarrassingly bad. So God's trained me and carried me through, and just developed me as a leader in certain ways. And but then my career took a different path, took me over to the Netherlands, and so that was a development for me in my career. And I jumped out of youth ministry, obviously, to travel abroad. And that was a stressful 2 years for me, but I came back, had some children, and settled down, and I'm back here now. And in the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, I've been serving in young adults ministry, and that is class. So so that's kind of where God's taken me today. And I just can't stress enough that what God has taught me is to serve no matter what. And you always have to give of yourself. There has to be a sacrifice in serving, because if you serve and it's just because you're either getting something out of it or just because it suits you, I personally don't think it's true serving, because I think serving does require sacrifice. And that means coming in to the services that you don't want to come into, the nights off, the midweeks that you don't want to come into, the leaders' meetings, whatever it is, and you're like, oh, couldn't be bothered. It's also keeping an eye on checking your own heart and keeping a testimony to God publicly and in the church. So so God's taken me on a great journey there, and I'm happy where he has me. And bit by bit, he is just teaching me and bringing me deeper as I go along. So, you know, I know that God has many more plans for me, but just don't know exactly what they all are, when they're going to happen, and I'm not even stressed about it even slightly. So, do you know what? When it happens, it happens. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and that's a nutshell. I've enjoyed hearing your story, man. I was even thinking as you were talking about where God has brought you, where what He is doing in your life now. I remember Pastor Carter Conlon. He was preaching at Summerfire a couple of years ago. I can't remember which year, but that's besides the point. But he was talking. His message was on the will of God. And he said something, and it's so profound, but it's so true. He said this: I never found the will of God, but the will of God found me.
Wow.
meaning that he was someone who looks after sheep, but a shepherd, sheep farmer, whatever they call him, and he was just being faithful with that. Then he was brought into pastoring a really small countryside church, and then God brought him to Times Square, and now he's a part of Summit. So he was talking about the importance of embracing every step of that journey, despite whether it's comfortable, confusing, lonely, frustrating, because ultimately it's a season of preparation every stage of life you're at, you know. So I thought that was very appropriate to share that, just as you were sharing, man, you know.
Awesome. Yeah, that's class. And I think that's the exact same sermon that I mentioned earlier that really touched me, and it was on the will of God.
Yeah.
Same sermon. I'd love to get it back on tape from Omnivision or something, because that is it was an awesome sermon, and that really touched me and changed my whole mindset as a Christian. So, and one of the things he mentioned in that too, which was great, is people, you know, are looking for the will of God, like you mentioned, and the will of God found them. But he said, people want to know what the will of God is, but it's right there in the Bible. You know, it's like the will of God is to feed the widow and the orphan, and to reach out to the lost, seek His kingdom first, and it specifically says, this is the will of God. So you're like, why are you wondering what is the will of God? If you can't serve in the small things and the things that He's made clear to serve, do this first, do that first. Like, you want in some special will of God for your life, but it doesn't happen that way.
That's right.
And I know God's been speaking to me recently, and one thing that He's kind of dropped in my heart is as someone who serves in the church and wants to continue to serve in church. If I was to kind of, you know, some people want to be a certain person in church, do work doing a certain ministry or whatever it is, and they want to be something, and yet their life right now in this moment of time, it doesn't actually serve that purpose. It doesn't meet those expectations. So, let's say, for example, you want to preach. You're not even preparing a sermon yourself. You're barely even reading yourself, or you want to be, you know, a worship leader. You need to start singing. You need to start playing guitar. You need to start doing something. You want to. You need to show the heart of a servant.
Yeah.
And before you get given any kind of position to serve in the church, you serve in the smallest, and you work your way up, because it's the heart of a servant is what God sees, and you need to show the heart of a servant first. Ask for that, and then from there, God gives you the next step, because it's only baby steps that we take. I know people have come and gone in our church for years because they were disappointed that they didn't get X position or that position, or other people overlooked and or wasn't recognized for this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. God says to be humble. God says to keep your head down and serve regardless. Avoid conflict, you know. So people love to take conflict head on. So
I love it. What you're saying there, man, it's actually drawing it back to my mind. Pastor Patrick was preaching at young adults just last Sunday gone, and his message was it was on embracing your seasons, and he shared something that was just, you know, sometimes when you need that Holy Spirit conviction moment. He said that a lot of people want the microphone, but they don't want the mop.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
He was saying about how God doesn't look at your gifts, your talents, your looks, your finances. He actually looks at the heart. And if the heart is not in the right posture, He can't trust you with the mic. So maybe it's your season to be faithful in just cleaning the church or whatever else. But I just thought it was so profound, man. Like, it's so many people, it's desire to have the mic, to preach, to share, to sing, but yet if you ask someone to sweep the floor, it's like, oh, I haven't been called to do that. But it's like, just do it. Like, be faithful. It's the church you attend is your church as well. It's not just Pastor Nick, Pastor Patrick, Pastor Ham, Pastor Steve. It's our church. So we've got to be faithful. If you see something on the floor, just pick it up and put it in the bin. Don't be looking for someone to, oh, you need to do this. Like, if you see something, like, pick up a brush and sweep the floor, something as simple as that, man. It's the small things, right, of being faithful in the small things, as simple as bringing out a bag of rubbish or turning off the lights, or
you see a gap there. You see a gap there, and you just fill it, you know.
Right.
And you don't wait for somebody else. You just fill it, because it's God's church. It's His organization. It's His ministry, and He's got a gap in there, and you're expected to fill it. And if you don't want to fill that, if you don't want to fill the small gaps, then you know. It's like I can't remember his name now because it's one of those random Hebrew names. But
Yeah.
there was that chap that took in the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament when it stumbled over and it killed multiple people, and I think it was when it killed Uzzah, and so when they didn't want to take it back to Israel, and I forgot his name. It slips my mind, but he took it into his house.
Yeah.
He said, "I'll take it and I'll care for it and I'll look after it," and the Lord blessed him because of that, abundantly. And then when the Ark of the Lord was eventually removed from his house by King David and brought into the temple, he's like, well, I'm going where that's going. And he's like, I don't care what I'm doing. And he's like, I'm going to serve there. I'm going to serve in the temple. And you see his name 4, 5, 6 times pop up there because he's got all these different positions. He's the doorkeeper. He's the cleaner, the sweeper. You name it. He prepares the bread. He prepares whatever. He's there and he's doing it no matter what. And that is the heart of a servant, and that's what God has called us to, no matter what. Absolutely. And once we find that place, God starts to show us the next step. Even though we never give up that, we never move on from being a servant. But once you finally establish that and do it with the right heart, then step B will come.
That's right. I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying there, my man. We're going to move on to the Q&A segment, right? Now, before we do, chill. These questions are not tricky. You're one of my closest friends, my man, so we're just dialoguing. Are you ready?
Oh, crack on, man.
Brilliant. So you've said you're a worship leader, you sing in church, you have done so faithfully for so many years. But when did Nathan start to learn to play the guitar or even discover that he could sing?
Oh, I think I started playing the guitar when I was 13.
Oh.
Because Dad had a guitar in the house and he just started showing me some chords. He probably gave me a few months here and there of how to play, kicked me off. And really it was just, I didn't know if YouTube was there then, but it was just finding stuff online. It was Googling stuff. I was just finding chords and then just learning and listening to songs. And, you listen, I suppose worship music really started to take over what my main listening was, actually kind of from the youngest of ages, really as a teenager. And all I wanted to do was learn those songs. So I just went from learning song after song. I mean, I do regret not getting actual proper guitar lessons because you kind of learn and you don't. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know that I don't know. What I do, I can do really, really well, but it's only a really, really small portion of what I should be able to do. Right. So I was playing from about I think the age of 13, maybe 15, somewhere in there anyway. And then when I was 16, I think I done my first ministry song in church. I thought it was the best thing ever. Yeah. I thought it was class, and then I listened back and I go, "Well, that was shockingly bad." So I honestly don't know when I ever realized that I could sing, because it was one of those things that I had to kind of grind out that little tiny little diamond in the rough,
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'd call it a diamond, but it took me a lot of work to finally get to where I was. So yeah, but 16, 17, I started singing.
Wow, that's mad. And I suppose that we all know, you've mentioned at the start of this podcast that you're Pastor Nick's son. So you've grown up as a pastor's kid, right? And if you've been around church for any period of time, you've heard the term pastor's kid, and people naturally think that pastor's kids get to go to everything for free. They get to be treated a certain way, and there's an abundance of grace upon them to kind of do whatever they want. But I suppose for you, man, I've asked your brother Jordan this, who's a very good friend of mine as well. Did you, growing up as a pastor's kid, did you feel a sense of pressure to be that model child, to act a certain way, and because obviously you were representing your family because your dad is the senior pastor of our church?
In short, no, I didn't feel pressure from that. Okay. Ultimately, because I was raised really well, and I was taught what was right, what was wrong, and what I should strive for. And at my early ages of a teenager, from say 11, 12, right up until I was 17, Gavin was a really, really close mentor as well as a youth leader. And he's one of those guys, you know him well, he will tell you exactly how he feels and exactly what he thinks. Yeah. And he shared his heart with me, and he directed me. And he, when he see me, as a younger teenager, flirting with a girl here and there in the youth group. Like he was the first guy to come in, so shut me down. He kept me straight and narrow. But the pressure wasn't really there as a PK. And a lot of the stuff that you said, it's kind of true. You do get certain privileges, and I won't deny that. But at least in my experience, maybe it's different now. There's a bit more eyes on you now. But the one thing that I find frustrating is, I mean, I was blessed. There's no doubt I was blessed with the family I was given. But then what frustrates me is other people can be condescending of that as well.
Yeah.
And be jealous or expect more from you.
Yeah.
It's not that they expect more from you. That's not really what bothered me. It's just when they kind of snuff at you a little bit and think, well, you don't really know what it's like, and we all kind of go through similar struggles.
Yeah.
But I was putting up with other people's perspective of you that I found difficult, because some people aren't as gracious, especially as a teenager. So that was hard, and you still kind of get that every now and again. Not now, not at the age of 30, 31, but to my early 20s as well. I probably got a bit of it as well.
Yeah. Well, because I remember my pastor before I came down to Cork, what was it, 7-8 years ago now. I was in a church here in Wexford called Wexford Christian Community Church, and the senior pastor, Pastor Paul Phillips, if we forgot his name there, my apologies. But I would have great dialogues with him, and he said something, and I'll never forget it for as long as the Lord has me here. He said, Jerry, if the Lord ever called you to ministry on some capacity, it's like having a dartboard on your back. He said, especially pastoral ministry, because people just want to throw those darts, and they don't just want to hit the dartboard. They want the dart to actually go through it and actually feel like it's piercing your skin. And he was saying about how he's experienced so much of that. I suppose for you, man, you've grown up and you've seen your dad weather, as I've seen him weather, some very difficult storms, man, being under constant scrutiny, maybe online or in person, or people having their opinions, or you're preaching too much on this topic, or you don't speak enough about end times. And I suppose for you, as Pastor Nick being your dad, I presume it would definitely draw another level of respect towards your dad, to see how he is gracious to people when they're not gracious to him.
Oh, Jerry, it's actually incomprehensible how malicious people can be.
Yeah.
And how the heart can be. And these are people that serve in the church. These are people who just attended church for years.
Yeah.
People that you think are faithful. And I just genuinely cannot believe what people can do and what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And I've seen it throughout the years, and you are 100% right. I mean, my respect levels for my dad is through the roof, because I know what he had to put up with. Same with Gavin as well. He was one of the core members of our church, and drives so much change and so much ministry and so much support, and so many others in the church as well. But particularly for my dad, he was the main target, and it was. Yeah, it's just shocking to see what people can say and do, and the extents that they will go. Yeah. There is a really evil out there, and it's strange to see evil manifest in the church. It's one thing. It's one thing your flesh manifesting, but I suppose that is evil too in a sense. But to see real dark evil just being spewed upon and like arrows fired at ministry leaders, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you can talk to any ministry leader, even youth leaders or anything like that. You could say the same to Owen O'Sullivan back in the day when he was a youth pastor. Yeah. You'd say the same to Pastor Stephen. Even they say the same to Patrick. Like, it's almost like I only from what I can see, I have never been in that position as a pastor, but you almost probably feel it. Nobody wants to be your friend. It's one of those weird places to be, and I see it, and it's not a position that I envy. And even though that perception that nobody wants to be your friend, that's not true, but it is a perception that you get because there are some really negative people out there. Yeah. But it's not an easy job. I wouldn't, by volunteering, I wouldn't become a pastor by any stretch of imagination. And you have to have a heart for your church as well as a heart for God. If you don't have the heart for your church, you're just not going to succeed as a pastor, because you have to love people.
That's right.
And it's the hardest thing to do, Jerry, because just the people I've seen come through, and I've seen endless amounts of it, and I'm sure there's plenty that I haven't seen that I've been sheltered from, but it can be really bad.
Yeah. I was even thinking there, man, just as you were talking about that, because everything you're saying is spot on, man, and I mean that. I was thinking there, you know, sometimes people can have an attitude in church, and I put my hands up a couple of years ago. I would have had the attitude, you know, oh, our church isn't involved in this area, you know, prison ministry or something else. And I remember someone in our church who's still there to this day. I'm not going to name their name because that's besides the point. But they said this to me: if there's something on your heart, don't be forcing it on the pastors. Maybe it's something that God is calling you to pioneer, to start up a ministry on your heart. It's not that the pastor's responsibility to start up all these ministries. We're a church, which means the arm can't do what the leg can do, and so on and so forth. I remember that being so pivotal to me, catching that yes, the pastor's heart is to cast vision and preach the word and lead the congregation, but ultimately the Lord will give you a vision to be involved in a particular area of church as myself, and vice versa, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the big errors that we do as a church, and this is right across the board, is we kind of put leaders on a pedestal and think that they are something that they aren't.
Yeah.
And we do forget that they are human beings
Correct.
that have the same struggles as us. And we put them out there to be like this ridiculously crazy spiritual leader that's almost like a Gandhi, you know, in our eyes. And you can look at some great leaders out there globally. And I know, like, for example, Ravi Zacharias, he was a great minister out there. And, you know, so many people were blessed by his ministry. And I was too.
Yeah.
And then the scandals that come out then later. Now, I'm not saying that I believe them or don't believe them, and they may or may not be true, but it's the fact that he's an example that you can be raised to such a point, and then people fall away because they see someone at such a position, and all of a sudden they see a fault or an error, and they're like, "Oh, this can't be true," or and they just fall from these crazy heights because they have unrealistic expectations of pastors and leaders. So I would never ever raise somebody beyond other than the fact that they're a selfish, sinful human being that God has graciously forgiven. And it's only by His grace that they're carried like everybody else, no different. They're not like some pioneers by their own strength and imagination, and they don't change the gospel. They don't bring something new. They just bring the gospel, warts and all. And so we have to remember that, because people look at leadership and think they can point out so many flaws. I mean, I'm sure if I wanted to sit down, I could point out flaws left, right, and center, things that are missed, things that aren't looked after, or not given enough recognition. Like, I mean, there's only so much recognition you can even remember to give for somebody, never mind, hundreds of people or whatever it is, or however big your church is. There's only so much you can do, and so often. So, yeah, you can't be raising any leadership, no matter what type of leadership it is. You can't raise them to a point.
That's right.
You will be let down with them, because you have to expect that you're going to be let down by them at some stage, because they're humans.
Oh yeah, man. But I love what you touched on something, man, at the start about, how during your college years, Sharon, your wife, how she was your accountability partner and she is now, right? And I think it's so important, man, no matter what capacity of ministry you are involved in, to have accountability partners.
Yeah.
People who won't always agree with you, people who are not afraid to challenge or to call out that area. And I know for me, two of those people in my life is Danny and Pastor Patrick, people who call me out, who have those conversations that in the moment I don't like it, but I walk away from the conversation going, that's why I deeply respect that person. And because it's like you said, man, because if you don't have accountability, you're open to the enemy to just come in and have a field day with your mind and to slightly pull you away. And do you know what I mean? So I do definitely think it's so important for anyone in ministry to have accountability partners, people who you can go to if you have questions, people who can lovingly correct you,
Yeah. And that's a sign of a good leader, no matter what level of leadership they're on. If you have a leader that will, even when it's hard and they don't want to say something offensive,
Yeah.
They will say it to you because they know, because they're saying it out of love, and they have to say it. And even if they're wrong, the heart is that they want to see you, change for the better, or bring something before the Lord, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The heart is mostly right all the time, and a good leader will point out things and say stuff that you don't want to hear. Whereas leaders then are kind of, they're not. Yeah, they're not going to push the buttons that people don't want to hear. They just fizzle away and have a cup of tea and everything's all fine. And just talk about theology. That's no good to anyone. No. Theology is no good. Right. So that's only a secondary issue.
Yeah. I agree, my man. And I want to ask you, Nathan. So you're a creative. I define a creative as someone who is gifted or has a talent in a specific area that is actively using it, right? And what advice, so maybe there's someone listening, man. So this is season 3, which is about artists and creatives I enjoy listening to and supporting. And the question I have, man, is what advice would you give someone who is wanting to start creating, whether it be playing the guitar, writing songs, dramas, whatever, but they're not sure how to start? I suppose from you as someone who has to journey through that, what advice would you give that may be helpful to our listeners?
I would think the first thing that comes to mind is, because it's something that I have to constantly remind myself of, is you have to be patient. And we put unrealistic expectations on ourselves to produce something. And a lot of the times, the heart behind producing something in an unrealistic time frame, or the quality of it isn't realistic.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of the time it's fleshly, and it's because we want it to look a certain way, to sound a certain way, to be appealing in the mainstream, in the mainstream media. We want it to be at that standard because we want success as someone who does creative work, music, whatever it is. So you can't put unrealistic stuff on you. Now, I'm only speaking from the perspective of a Christian. I don't know about from any non-Christian media, but from a Christian perspective, our gifts that God has given us is first and foremost to glorify Him. So whether that means just you and Him in the bedroom, just singing songs or writing stuff that's just to glorify Him in your writing, or whatever it is you do. And first and foremost, it's not about anybody else. Right. And so that's the first step. And then the second step is you have an audience around you immediately, and those are your friends, your family, and your church. And so before you think you're going to go off and start reaching all these other people out there and all the thousands and the millions, you need to first of all start and focus on your church and bless them. Now, it's a slow process if you're not particularly driven like me. I have a heart for it, but it's another thing getting time out to do something. And as you know, Jerry, I got myself a computer last Christmas, a Mac computer, to start recording some music. Sure. So and I've made a start in some stuff, but it just takes so much time. Yeah. And maybe I'm a bit of a perfectionist, that I don't want to put something out because it's not flipping Apple Music quality or whatever it is. Yeah. Maybe I'm a little bit too picky, but like all last year, for example, ever since lockdown, I've been having the guitar on the bed behind me when I'm in work, because my office is in one of the bedrooms here, and every couple of minutes, maybe every hour or whatever it is, I'll just take up the guitar for 5-10 minutes, whatever it is. Yeah. And ever since lockdown started, I think I wrote between lockdown and probably like last January, probably February was the last time I wrote something. And I think I wrote something like at least 12, 13 songs in that time frame. So I've written quite a lot. So I've had a lot of stuff there. Now I'm just like dying to kind of get it out there. Yeah. But putting unrealistic time frames on yourself, it doesn't help. It puts you under stress. And you know what, the heart isn't there, and the satisfaction isn't there either. I think put it in God's hands and say, look, if this is something that you wanted to do, you'll give me that drive, you'll give me the opportunity. So that's the best advice I can give is don't be unrealistic.
Yeah, brilliant. I want to share something, man. on the back note of this, I remember I had a conversation with Pastor David Ham last year during lockdown. Actually, we had a quick Zoom call for the youth Instagram page. We done hope sessions, Instagram lives, and we were talking about the creative process and stuff. And I was sharing about, in Genesis 1 verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, who, God, what created." So we and you, anyone who puts their faith in Jesus, right? We belong to the family of God, and He, by His grace, has deposited a measure of creativity in each and every one of us, so unique, so different, yet so special. And I'm telling you, man, as a creative myself, and I know you will agree, when you use that creativity that God has graced you with, to give back to Him in worship, I'm telling you, man, it's one of the most satisfying, one of the most heart-filling things ever, to take that which He has given you, to give it back to Him. And I'm pretty sure for you, man, as a father yourself, you might be able to relay on this. When Josiah, Kate, or Nathan, when they create a craft or something and they give it to you, even though you gave them the raw materials, whether how good it is or not, that's besides the point. But it's something about giving it back to their father who provided them in the first place. Surely that's got to warm your heart, and
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, it does as a dad. And I think I actually love that bit that you just shared. In the beginning, God created, and that has to be the exact same sequence when it comes to us, and it comes to us creating stuff. Yeah. It's God who has to create it. It has to come from God. That's right. It has to be from His heart. And it could, for someone who does music, for example, it's just like you could just be singing a chorus over and over and over again, and then you're like, oh, that kind of works, that sticks, oh, that sounds good. But it comes from a place of worship, and actually worshiping God with that. And then you're like, let's try and flesh that out. Let's try and add something to it. Sure. Let's try and add a verse, a chorus, whatever it is, or a bridge, whatever it is. Yeah. And from there, you try to develop something, because you have an idea, you have a sound in your head, and you have a chorus, you have the base of it, and you have the melody line. And so, but it all starts with, it comes from the heart of God. And I think that has to be, I think if you create stuff as a Christian, and if you're being honest with yourself, you have to look at everything that you've created and think, well, if you're in the process of creating, say, is that from God? Do I want to share that? Yeah. And it's not to say that we can't create stuff that is just, I suppose, say, non-worship or whatever it is. And that's a different tone. It's not that we're, it's not that it's illegal in the Bible or something, or sinful. But when it comes to Christian ministry and blessing people, it starts off with God. So
that's right. I love it, man. The next question I have, and I already have two artists in my mind who I think you could possibly say, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. If Nathan Cassidy right now could email any artist in the world to have a feature, who would it be and why?
There is only one artist, Jerry, not even two, and it would have to be Shane and Shane, because I got my first album when I was 15 in the States. Never heard of him in my life. Because it was before YouTube and all that kind of stuff, and before all the online music, that we can't get Christian music over here. So I went to the States, I found the CD, and it was like, I was all about getting Christian music at the time because we couldn't buy it here. And I got Shane and Shane. I was like, these guys are class. They play guitar really, really well. They sing amazing, and their songs just absolutely glorify God. And they have been, without a doubt, the single greatest blessing in my life from a music and worship perspective. And they've set an unbelievably deep example. Yes. And it's not that I follow in their footsteps, because I ultimately follow in God's footsteps. Yeah. But they are a huge, huge example. And it's one thing I want to do before I die, is go to one of their concerts, to meet them, to do an album or something. Not do an album with them, but
Hey, don't be you never know what the Lord might do. Come on now.
You never know. You never know. If you're hearing this, Shane Bernard, Shane Everett. Yeah. You don't know, but seriously though, they have been the greatest blessing from a worship perspective in my life.
Yeah, because I know, actually, funny enough, I remember about a year ago, you actually recommended Shane and Shane to me, and I've listened to maybe half of their albums. I haven't listened to it all yet, but I'm telling you, man, that the level of quality of content, I mean, they are phenomenal songwriters. the way they take the scriptures and apply it
But
to music.
they're just they're just true worshippers. That's what I love about it. Is the worship is just pure and true, and it wants nothing other than God glorified in the worship. That's literally the whole, every album that they make. It's just about glorifying God in every single thing, and they're not mainstream, like, I don't know what's the word, like popular in a sense, like whatever happened to name other names. They're just kind of there in the background. They're doing their thing. They are relatively popular, but they're not all about the big show. It's about honoring God, and that's ultimately what it comes down to.
That's right. Yeah. So, guys, for the listeners who are listening to this, you do have time. Go onto YouTube, Spotify, whatever your music platform is. Shane and Shane. Give them 2 hours of your. That's right. 2 hours of your time to listen to their songs, be encouraged, be built up by. I'm telling you, I love listening to them. But I said there was going to be two artists, and the first one you got was obviously Shane and Shane. But I was thinking you were going to say David Crowder, because I think he is absolutely phenomenal.
He is phenomenal. I was always questioning myself whether I liked his voice to listen to. There's no doubt he's a good singer. Yeah. I suppose it's kind of a certain taste. But David Crowder, for me, when it comes to being a creative for music, specifically music, he probably is the best, because if you listen back to his older albums, like the A Collision, B Collision, there's a few others there before that. I forgot their names now. But he has played every genre of music you can imagine, from classical to heavy metal to worship to country. He does plenty of country stuff. He just does everything, rap and everything. He is an all-rounded quality musician and songwriter. Yeah. And before that, and you probably wouldn't have heard, maybe you might have heard of DC Talk. Did you ever hear DC Talk? They were back in the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah. And they were like David Crowder in a sense. They play every genre you can think of. And they were.
That's hard to do, man.
No, that's unbelievable. Yeah.
Oh, that's hard to do,
because it's very, very creative.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, man, because obviously as a worship leader, you said you listen to a lot of worship music, and obviously I attend church. I listen to worship music, Maverick City, Elevation, Hillsong, pretty much anyone that's out there I'm willing to listen to. I'm a big fan of Casting Crowns personally. They released a song recently called Scars, and the music video is so powerful. Like, just the visual of it.
They're brilliant.
I want to ask you, man, as a worship leader, I've noticed it myself. There's definitely, I remember a couple of years ago, the worship, the style of worship and the song were very self-focused, very all about you and all this. But now it seems to be definitely heading in a direction where it's getting back onto Christ glorifying, being focused on Jesus. Everyone, man, it seems to be exploding. People are getting back to the heart of worship. Sorry, Chris Tom, I think that's your song. But do you notice that as a worship leader yourself?
I do. And I have to agree with you. I felt the exact same way. I don't mind listening to some of the mainstream worship out there and some of the more youthful and young adult type worship. I like some of it.
Sure.
I'm not against it by any stretch of imagination. I'm just always, I'm one of these, I'm a bit strange in the sense that I don't like something at first only because everyone likes it. And it's not because they like it. It's just, I'm just skeptical. So I kind of sit back, I kind of have a listen, I see how it plays out. And yes, that music was very like that for years. But now it's very popular in the mainstream worship to glorify Christ centrally. Yeah. And it's amazing to see, and I can't criticize that. Yeah. And so my skepticism when it comes to the ridiculously popular bands that everyone loves when it comes to Christian music, I can't fault them because the music is pretty darn good. Yeah. I'm just, maybe, I suppose I can always criticize the image because people love their image no matter what. If you're popular and you're famous, image is a huge thing no matter what. It's something that everyone struggles with, even on our less famous bases like myself and many others. Yeah. But even if you're not famous, you still struggle with image. I think everybody does. But So you're going to see image right across the board, from mainstream to not. So I'm always conscious of that.
Yeah. Thinking of image, right? There's one thing I love about David Crowder. Don't worry, I'm not madly obsessed with him. I'm not. But I love the fact that he's just like. So I'm a big I can't grow bum fluff. Never mind a beard. But I'm a big fan of a show called Duck Dynasty. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, I know the one.
He's like a hillbilly, so he's from Louisiana or wherever he's from. All these hillbillies playing the banjos, and yet he has the biggest beard, the longest hair. He looks, no disrespect.
You know what, like, fair play to him for keeping it all these years, because he's never not had that. He's always had it, and that's just who he is. I suppose not many people were brave enough to compete with that style of hair. But
no, I love it.
He's like a nutty professor. He's
hey,
genius.
come on now.
But that's funny. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I'm honestly, David Crowder, as you said, he has a song with my favorite my favorite rapper, period, Kevin Burgess, and he has his own podcast and all that, doing great things. But they have a song, and it just goes so well. It's such a hillbilly sort of thing, and then out of nowhere the rap verse comes in. It's it's on his album. It's called The American Prodigal.
What's it called?
Is it the album called The American Prodigal or Prodigal America?
Yeah, The Prodigy, American Prodigy.
That's the one. Yeah. So I was halfway there.
I know the song. It's unbelievable. Yeah, how he can transition to. When would you ever put hillbilly music and rock and rap all in one song? But yet he does it to perfection. It's crazy. Yeah.
Shout out to David Crowder. You're welcome to come and minister to us at Court Church anytime. Hit us up at Court Church on Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff. Nathan, the last question I have for you, my man, is and I love asking my guests this question. If you could have dinner / conversation with 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say probably King David.
Okay.
Would be one. I would definitely say Jesus, because you have to put Jesus in there, because in the end of the day, he is the lover of our soul. You can't say it any more cheesy than that, but that's what it boils down to. And then Shane and Shane, because those are my number one. I am their number one fan globally, and I have no doubt about that in my mind. And I'm dying to meet them, and I love their stuff. And even if I just got the message to them to tell them how much they've blessed me, I'd even love to bless them with that, So yeah.
Nathan, it has been an honor to have you on this guest, but it's also an honor to call you a friend. And I'm saying that to honor you publicly, man. I mean it, especially in the last year to 2 years. Because I remember our friendship, man, it kind of happened organically over the last 2 years. Prior to that, I seen you in church, and most of the time you had your guitar in your hand, and you're like, all right, Jerry, bye. And I was like, bye, Nathan, because we were kind of...
I know.
Now, just to see, I mean, the conversations we've had over the last year about ministry, Jesus, music, social media, and you were a part of my online experience. But to honor your wife as well, man, you guys represent my merch better than I do. To see you guys wearing the hoodies and stuff, I mean it. Like, it's really refreshing when you can put time into a project, or whether it be merch or whatever, and people actually come up to you and say, "Oh, I love it, it's great." Or I remember when I created the Picture Perfect video. So that video shoot happened at 9:30 on a Saturday morning, and I finished at 4:30 down in the marina where the Marina Market is now, before it was all done up. And it was a long day, man. But I remember Sharon, it was a Friday night, she came up to me, she said, "I want you to know that video you done was absolutely incredible." And it dawned on me, man, to hear that, yes, we put in 7-8 hours or whatever it was, that's besides the point. But it blessed me to know that those 8-9 hours were worth it, to hear someone encourage me that way. Yeah. So I really appreciate you both, and
that's awesome.
Many more years of friendship with you, my man.
No, that's class, man. And the same back to you, Jerry. And it has been class getting to know you over the last, like you said, the last year, 2 years. Yeah. We've always known each other reasonably well over the years, and always very friendly. Got on very well, but never spent time together.
Yeah.
And it's just because life gets a hold of us, and it's just one thing after another. And I'm relatively busy with work and kids and church, so it's all go for me. But it's been a blessing to be your friend, and to watch your ministry and your project and see your vision actually develop and manifest into something that is blessing people. It is nothing short of an inspiration to me, because it all started with a heart and nothing else, well, and talent, because you always had that. You always had, not just not a heart without talent, but you always had that ability to bring something with confidence and to write some incredible material. And it doesn't matter what kind of audience you present it to, you do with a heart and a half. And it's been a huge blessing to me. Both your content and your heart and your vision, and just how you have a passion for it. That's the number one thing that stands out to me, is your passion for what you do. And despite what people say, despite what people do, and I'm sure there's plenty of things on the journey that can be disheartening, and you might think, oh, maybe I didn't get any feedback for that one, or nothing from this, or I didn't get any text messages, or didn't get enough views, or the views were good for that one, but they're not good for this one. And do you know what? It's an up and down thing. But even if you've done it for one person and you love what you do, and even if you've done it for just yourself because you bless yourself doing it, it's totally worth it. And so, fair play to you, Jerry, and you've stuck with it and you continue to stick with it. It's actually class to see. So, keep heart and keep at it. Don't ever let anything kind of let that dip, because you are blessing people, and you are an example for others as well. So those two alone, it's class.
Appreciate that. And it's actually a miracle of God that we're friends, because I can't stand Chelsea. The way you talk about Timmy Werner, I mean, I'll never forget. He had that first attack in the Champions League final, went to kick it with his went to kick it with his left foot, and the ball hit with his right foot, and it went further away from the goal, and he was in the box.
Yeah. You're just a typical United fan who just can't give credit to any other team or any other player in the Premier League. That's what it boils down to, really,
But that's it. I'm not on the fence about it. I'm very committed with it. I don't care what you say. Yes, you won the Europa League, or no, not the Europa. Sorry, the Super League.
You're just tunnel vision. That's literally your United fan.
Yeah. The reason why Man United haven't won any silverware in the last 3 to 4 years is because we're actually being gracious. We're giving many people just an opportunity to win the Champions League, the Premier League. That's what it is.
Fair play.
Yeah. Well, my man, listen, we're going to close this podcast episode. Thank you so much for being a guest. And guys, we will talk to you again next week with another episode of the Hope Sessions podcast. Don't forget to share with your friends, your family, your Instagram story, your Facebook. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Join us again next week for another episode of the Hope Sessions podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Hope Sessions podcast. Why not share it with your friends and family, and even on your social media platforms? Don't forget to leave a review, because this greatly helps to spread the word about the podcast. And remember, hope is to life as oxygen is to the body. Till next time, take care and God bless.